and you put all your eggs into the social media basket, you will lose. And if you've got a talent, make some money with it. People that listen to podcasts make more money and they're just higher educated. Well, hello there, everyone. Welcome back to the Jennifer Allwood Show. I'm glad you're here today. I'm going to be talking on this episode about podcasting and why I think that a lot of business owners are missing a huge opportunity in not having a podcast. Now, listen, if you are somebody who's like, I literally have zero desire to, get on YouTube and talk. First of all, you don't have to have your podcast on YouTube. As most of you know by now, because I've been mentioning it, my podcast is back to being on YouTube. So you can watch it if you'd like to, but you don't have to. We went several years without having it on YouTube. So if you're like, I don't want to be on film, okay, you don't have to. If you think to yourself, I don't understand how to do any of the editing, whatever, I'm going to talk about that. I get it. I don't either. If you're like, I don't even know what I would talk about, I've got some thoughts for you. So what I'm trying to say is don't hit stop on this podcast episode just because you don't have a podcast or you don't want a podcast, because I might be able to convince you otherwise. And even if you don't have a business, listen, I was talking to Easton and a couple of his friends the other day. They have a Bible study at our house on Thursday nights. And one of them is just a really good communicator and also very knowledgeable about the Word of God. And I said to him, Luke, you need to have a podcast. This is a 19-year-old. And he goes, I've actually thought about that. And I'm like, the fact that you have a lot to say about scripture, the fact that you are able to communicate in a way that I pay attention to you would do really well with a podcast. And there's so many different types of podcasts anymore. There are podcasts that are faith-based. There's podcasts that are crime-based. There are podcasts on every single topic that you can think of. So if you're like in the homeschool arena, yes, one of the ladies in my mastermind has a podcast for her homeschooling business. And so any business that you have, I think that a podcast can be appropriate. So I just wanted to say that first of all. And then wanted to give you just the tiniest bit of background on the Jennifer Allwood Show. Okay. So I started this podcast in 2017 at the suggestion of a marketing company that I was working with out of New York City. They were trying to get me a deal on the DIY network or on the HGTV network. And so they thought that if I had a podcast where I showed my communication style, where I could show how many people are listening, that would be helpful in showing to the producers on both networks. So started that in 2017. In 2019, I hired Nell, who many of you know, Nell Stortz, who's worked with me since 2019. And she started managing the podcast. At that point, we had less than 500,000 downloads total. And we gave her the goal of getting to 1 million downloads in the next year, the next 12 months. And so she actually took 9 months to get to 1 million downloads. And now we're getting ready to hit 6 million downloads in just the next 5 weeks. We consistently stay at the top of 5% of all podcasts in terms of how many people listen, download, all of the things. I've done well over 525 episodes, I believe. And when you're listening to this, I'm not sure it'll be number 300 something, but it's because if you followed me for a while, for a while I did something called Monday Fire, and those were numbered in a different way. And so we have stopped calling them that on Mondays, but overall, 525 episodes. And one more thing I want to point out, we have 1,800 reviews of the podcast. Okay. The reason that matters, well, I'll talk about the reason why that matters, but I want you to know that I'm not just talking about how I think you should have a podcast and I've been doing it for 10 minutes and nobody's actually listening. Okay. That I just want to establish that first of all. All right. So I want to tell you how Team Allwood, how the ladies on my team, how we like to look at our podcast, because many people look at podcasting as another revenue stream. And I do not look at it like that at all. I think that when people are using it, trying to make money, and they're making money off of sponsors, people sponsoring their podcast, I think they're missing just a huge opportunity to just love on their people and seed plant for something else that you'll have coming up that's open. Okay, so what do you mean by seed planting, Jen? So every single business out there needs to do what I call seed planting. So a few minutes ago, you heard me mention Lisa Nearing, who's in my mastermind, who has a homeschooling business, right? So I'm mentioning to you my mastermind. that is a seed plant. So I'm not saying, hey, you should go sign up for my mastermind at creatorsnextlevel.com. Like, I'm not saying go fill out an application, but what I am doing is I'm just gently planting a seed. Oh yeah, Jen has a mastermind. And you'll hear me do that several more times throughout this podcast episode. And so whenever you have an opportunity to get people to listen to you, to get any sort of a size of audience to listen to you, take that opportunity to just plant the seed that you have some other things coming up, to just, remind people of what it is that you do, to just gently give a reminder of what it is that you have for sale. That is what's called seed planting. So we use my podcast to do that all the time. In addition, we use my podcast. We're going to leave that there. We're going to podcast. We use my, not podcast, to push opt-ins frequently. So when you hear me talk about how I have a 4-part video series or audio series on how to buy your first short-term rental, and you can get it at jenniferallwood.com/short-term rental. That is me pushing you to an opt-in, to a freebie, to get people onto my email list, because your email list is way more valuable than what your social media is. And if you don't believe me, that's because you're not in my inner circle. Seed plant, seed plant, seed plant. Because in my inner circle, the ladies know you have to have an email list. You are on just like rented space when you are on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, any of those things. At any moment, Mark Zuckerberg could wake up and say to himself, you know what? I am done with Facebook, and shut that baby down. Do I think that'll happen? No. But what I'm saying is, if he does that and you've put all your eggs into the social media basket, you will lose. You will absolutely lose. This is why it's so dangerous when people just are on Etsy and they're not doing Etsy in their own website. Like, you don't own your Etsy site. You own your website. Do work on things that you own. So you need your own URL, your own website, in addition to your Etsy account if you want to, and you need an email list in addition to all of your social medias. So we push people to my email list pretty stinking consistently. You can run ads for offers on your podcast. Okay. So listen, every podcast has to have a host. We use Libsyn, that's Libsyn, Libsyn, as our podcast host. So essentially, we've got somebody on my team that uploads it to Libsyn. Libsyn sends it out to like Spotify, Apple, Android, all the different places that Libsyn does. And so what you can do then when you use Libsyn is, when you have something that is up for sale. So I'm thinking about my friend, Kristen Farrell, who's in my mastermind right now. She has Not Your Mama's Bible Study. She also has a podcast. Okay. So if she were using Libsyn, and I don't know if she is, I should text her and ask her, but if she's using Libsyn, when she gets ready to relaunch Not Your Mama's Bible Study, she can insert an ad and just say, hey guys, I'm not sure if you know this or not, but my Not Your Mama's Bible Study is currently open. I want you to go right now to blah, 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 to sign up. And what Libsyn will do is it will insert that into every podcast that you have, not just the most recent. The reason why that is so important is because whenever we put a new podcast episode out, about 40% of our overall listens are going to listen to it like that week, pretty quickly. 60% of our listens are going to come later. They're going to be somebody being on my, podcast page. They're going to go to jenniferallwood.com/podcast, or they're going to find me on the podcast app, and they are going to, consume 5 or 6, 7 podcasts in a row. And then they send me a DM on Instagram, and I smile happy because I love that. And so it's great if people are listening to old episodes, but Kristen has Not Your Mama's Bible Study open, that she can just push to that. Does that make sense? That's one of the brilliant things about doing a podcast. Jason, my husband, that man of God that he is, that sexy guy that I've been married to for almost 26 years, is getting ready to launch Fairway Finest. It is a golf apparel brand. When it is open for people to begin ordering, because they have just a set number of shirts at the beginning, they will sell out very quickly. When it's open, he could ask his wife or pay me. No, I'm kidding. He could ask his wife, will you insert an ad into all your podcasts saying, hey, just so you know, Fairway Finest is now open. Go here to get your spouse the perfect golf shirt, sweatshirt, hat, whatever. So see how you can leverage your podcast for whatever it is that you have open. You're launching a book, you talk about it on your podcast. You insert an ad into every single episode, and Libsyn is fabulous for that. I want to mention too that the people that listen to podcasting are a different clientele than the people that are watching your Facebook and watching your Instagram. So statistically speaking, over half of your listeners, so over 52% of your listeners will have an average annual income of at least $75,000. There are statistics that show that people that listen to podcasts make more money and they're just higher educated. And for a lot of you who have businesses, those are the type of people that you want to come to your landing page and sign up for your coaching, sign up for your one-on-one, join your, painting membership or what have you. You want people that have discretionary income, that are able to afford what it is that you're selling, right? So how do you reach those people? Not necessarily on Facebook, not on the Instagrams. They're the people that are still reading the paper in the morning. They're watching the stock market and they're listening to podcasts. So if you are finding that you are attracting to your business people that can't afford you, think about having a podcast so you can attract a totally different group of people. Okay. All right. So let's talk about some of the ways you can grow a podcast really quick, because I'm just going to kind of run through these really quickly, but these will be helpful for you. And if you're somebody who's like, okay, she's convinced me, I need to just start a podcast. I want you to grab a pen and a paper real quick, because I'm going to just give these to you fast. Okay. So if you're trying to grow a podcast that you already have, or you're starting it and you're like, I want to grow it quick, I suggest that you have short episodes. Mine are all under 15 minutes right now. Because the ability right now of humans to sit down and listen to something for 30, 45 minutes, an hour like we used to, that's gone. Okay. Unless you're Joe Rogan, unless you've just got, a huge, huge following. Otherwise, for the rest of us, we need to pay real close attention to the fact that we now have a shorter attention span than a goldfish. I've just read a statistic on that. I just talked about it in one of my podcast episodes. So we like to tell people to do 2 episodes a week if you can. Did you know, by the way, that 90% of all podcasts never get past 3 total episodes? 90% of all podcasts started will never get past the 3rd episode. So if you can just do 2 weeks of 2 episodes each week, baby, you're already past 90% of the people. So high five. Okay. If you're going to grow a podcast, we suggest you celebrate milestones. So just got to my first 1,000 downloads, just got to my first 10,000, my first 100,000. And you can celebrate. We've done some things in the past where we've done like giveaways. We've given away earbuds. We've made a big deal out of it. I've got balloons and I'm standing out by the pool. So make a big deal out of that, because when people are watching on social media and they're like, oh, her brand new podcast just hit 10,000 downloads, must be good. What am I missing? Maybe I should go listen. And there, now you have another subscriber. Does that make sense? Another way to grow your podcast is ask people at the end of your episode, or in the middle if you want to share this episode. I'm going to show you how to do this right now. Okay. So if right now you've been listening to me for the last 10 minutes and you're like, Jen, I still know I don't want a podcast. Listen, I wonder if your sister-in-law does, or I wonder if you've talked to somebody who's in one of those small business groups that you belong to, who's interested in a podcast. Would you just forward this episode to them right now? And by the way, every time you do that, that's how I get new subscribers. That's how we get more reviews. That's how we get great guests on at times, because they look at the number of reviews. And so I just appreciate you so much. Thank you for every time you share my content on social or one of my podcast episodes. See how easy breezy that was? When you just ask your people to do something like a share for you, you would be shocked at how often people will do it. I think we underestimate just making the ask. Hey guys, if this was meaningful to you, if you got something out of this, would you just share this? Share this on Instagram. Tag me on it. I want to see it. Appreciate you so much. That's all you need to do. Another way to grow your podcast is to bring in some special guests. We have really gotten away from having a lot of guests on my podcast, and I'm going to tell you why. The thing with looking at data is data don't lie. Okay. I love that saying, that data don't lie. So if you look at my podcast data for the Jennifer Allwood Show, when I have guests come on, our downloads on that episode goes down. It just does. And some people think, okay, if I have guests, it'll be way less work for me, to which I say no. That's not the case, because you're going to then have to figure out a time where you can record and they can record, and scheduling, and what if their Wi-Fi is terrible, and what if their sound is terrible, and then you got to edit more. And so it is more work to have a guest, number one. Okay. But you also think that person, then whoever I'm interviewing, inevitably they're going to, share my episode, and then I'm going to get a bunch of new followers and listeners. Listen, that doesn't happen that way. Take it from a girl who's been podcasting now for 6 million downloads. Okay. In 6 years, it doesn't happen that way. So we have quit having a lot of special guests on because my downloads go down. It's more work for me, and people don't love it, and people don't share it. So there's that. But this is the caveat. But if I ask Mr. Magic or one of my children to do an episode with me, you guys listen. I was actually just talking about this last week. I was at a business event. I paid to go to like a 2-day mastermind. Because not only do I talk to you guys about joining my mastermind, but I also belong to masterminds. I also invest in my own continuing education and knowledge and, business meetups. And so I was telling them that sometimes I wonder if my audience loves my husband more than me. Because if I have Jason come on the podcast, those will be our most downloaded episodes, inevitably. So I will be having him come on soon. We're going to be talking about Fairway Finest, his golf apparel company. So stay tuned for that. And I know that, when we're talking about growing the podcast, I said, I don't love for you to have guests to try to grow the podcast, but I will tell you what I do love. I do love if you can get on other people's platforms, other people's podcasts, OPPs. Okay. The reason I love that is this. Recently, I was interviewed by somebody for their podcast. I can't even think of who it is at the moment, but she said, Jennifer, at the end, where can people find you? And I said, well, since people are listening to a podcast right now, obviously they love podcasts. You can just follow me and subscribe and listen to me on the Jennifer Allwood Show. And so it's a great way if you can be on other people's platforms, other people's podcasts, and then they share that episode to their social media, their stories or whatever, tag you, what have you. If you can get on other people's platforms, that is an easy way for you to get in front of a brand new audience without any cost to you. So I do love it if you can get on somebody else's platform and you can give either out a freebie or you can tell them about your own podcast. Does that make sense? Okay. I'm going to tell you our process really, really quickly for doing a podcast. And again, this is going to be super tight, super condensed, super short. But if you have followed me for any length of time, you know I'm not techie. Okay. I am not techie. So what I'm responsible for with the podcast is coming up with topics, working with my team to flesh out ideas, notes, etc. We actually have a Voxer channel just entitled podcast for just the couple of people that are on my team who work on the podcast with me. If one of them has an idea, they put it in the thread. If Easton has some feedback about, how the podcast performed on YouTube, he gives it to us there. But we do have a Voxer thread just to talk about the podcast. Okay. So the team I'll flesh out ideas with them and they'll type up the notes and send it to me. Normally, Easton and I are recording on Mondays because I have to now, coordinate when we're recording, since he's recording it on a camera and he's uploading that to YouTube for me. If you get a chance, please hop over to YouTube and tell Easton he's doing a great job. I record it on Zoom for Zeke, who is Nell's son, who does my podcast editing. So yes, I am employing Zeke, I believe, is 21. Easton is 19. Yes, I have a 19 and a 21-year-old basically in charge of my entire podcast. Can I just say, quick shout out to all the other entrepreneurs who are trying to sow into the future potential businesses of kids that are teenagers and young adults. Because if you think for even just 1 second, I employed Easton because he's really good at YouTube, wrong. I mean, yes, he's really good at YouTube, but I'm also trying to plant the seed that, son, you're able to work from home this summer. And he is loving it because he's getting to do all the other things he loves, spend time with his girlfriend, go to thrift stores. I taught my kids really well. When years ago when they were little, I took them to every thrift store, every garage sale. He's loving that. Okay. So yes, he does an incredible job on YouTube, but I also want to plant seeds to people that are in that age bracket that, listen, if you've got a talent, make some money with it. I want them to know that you don't have to go work in a cubicle someday unless you want to. If you don't want to do that, look, you've got options. You can edit podcasts, you can film podcasts and upload them to YouTube. Like, people will pay you for this. So Zeke does all my editing. He loads it up to Libsyn. The team does the notes. Easton puts it on YouTube. All I do is come up with the content with my team, flush out the notes, and hit record. The rest of it, my team takes over from there. So it's not as much work as some of you think. I have a Yeti blue mic. If you're looking at me on YouTube right now, you can see that it's got rhinestones all over it. That's called a skin. It's literally like $10. It is a sticker that just goes all the way around the Yeti blue mic. My mic I got off Amazon. The skin I got off Amazon. If you Google Jennifer Allwood Amazon store, there is a list or a folder entitled Business Tools, and you can get the link to both of those there. So, all right. Was this helpful? Is anybody interested in starting a podcast? Will you either comment below if you're watching on YouTube, or if you're listening to this podcast episode, will you send me a DM on Instagram, or, post something and tag me on it? I want to know if you're considering starting a podcast. It's less work than you think. And I think that it's more valuable than what most business owners realize. So if you've thought about it, if you can carry on a conversation, if you don't mind being recorded, if you don't get all freaked out by that and you're trying to go your business, bada boom, bada bing, a podcast it is. So, all right, friends, I hope that this was fun for you. We will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye. Pretty sure I just said podcast, cash, and I think my tongue was like frozen on some other things. I think I stumbled on some of my words.